The Universal One by Dr. Walter Russell. The Universal One, Volume 1, First Principles. Book 1, Chapter 11, Energy Transmission. Some old misconcepts must now be corrected by a brief statement of principles, the full explanations of which will be given in their proper order. That light travels, energy is transmitted, electricity is conducted or inducted, and that heat radiates from its source to other localities are principles which modern science accepts as fundamental facts. These great misconcepts gave rise to the theory that the ether is a quivering elastic solid existing in space along the undulating waves of which light, heat, and all forms of energy can travel from one place to another. It is hereby conceded that all motion is expressed in waves, but those waves are not undulating. Energy cannot travel along waves because entire waves do not form in sequence. In other words, one whole wave is not completed before another begins. Waves are but effects which evolve as their cause evolves. Waves reproduce themselves part for part in sequence throughout the universe. Energy, therefore, cannot travel along waves which are not undulating, but are reproducing themselves part for part. It cannot leap across waves which are lacking in troughs and crests. Light does not travel, it reproduces itself. The light and heat which appear to come from the star or the sun has never left the star or the sun. That which man sees as light and feels as heat is the reproduced counterpart of the light and of the heat which is its cause. The cause remains in the restricted area of the state of motion where it began its existence as an appearance, until it expands into disappearance. That which man sees as a star is not a vision, a picture, an image, or a reflection of the star. It is the exact reproduced chemical counterpart of the star integrated as light within the observer. That which is true of the star is true of the image of the mountain, or the brook, or the meadow violet. No idea of mind is seen at a distance. The state of motion which represents the idea is reproduced as light by regenerative impact within the observer. No idea of mind has place or position in time or space. All idea is universal. All generated states of motion degenerate by expansion. Expanding states of motion regenerate by impact against the inertial planes of higher potential. Man has a higher potential than his surrounding atmosphere. Any object seen by man is a generated potential, which is higher than the expanded potential which intervenes between the object and the observer. The higher potential of the object discharges into the lower surrounding potential as the reproduced expanded counterpart of its particular state of motion, and recharges within the observer. This reproducing, expanding counterpart impacts against the inertial plane of equal pressures which exist somewhere between the object and the observer. This impact causes a reversal of the process of reproduction of an expanding counterpart into reproduction of a contracting counterpart. The expansion of a state of motion is degeneration. The recontraction of expanding states of motion is regeneration. The law of reproducing idea is the principle of universality. All that is of everything else that is. The principle of reproduction is the principle of energy transmission. Energy transmission is conductive and inductive. Conduction is the lowering of high potential toward inertia. Induction is the raising of a low potential away from inertia. The electronegative dissipative reaction impulse of energy transmission is conduction. The electropositive generative action impulse of energy transmission is induction. Conductive energy resists the completion of the wave. Inductive energy ever leaps ahead in its eagerness to complete the wave. Conductive energy ever pulls toward inertia through the harmonic of the wave. Inductive energy ever pulls toward the overtones of the waves, which are the points of maximum opposition. A state of equilibrium is the state of inertia which exists where pressures of two opposing high potentials of accumulated energy are equalized. Form of idea is a state of potential which is held together as form by the genero-active law of gravitation until it is torn apart by the radioactive law of radiation. All potential is constantly changing and interchanging. The potentials of all things are constantly rising because of their absorption of the discharged energy of all other states of motion. All mass is regenerated by absorption of the impacting radioactive energy of all other mass. Also are all potentials constantly lowering because of their expanded reproduction in the surrounding lower potentials. All mass is degenerated by its own radiation. All mass is generated by accumulation of the universal constant of energy into higher potential. That which is generated must be radiated. All mass is degenerated by release of energy accumulation. Consider, for example, the regeneration of this planet by the radiation of the Sun's high potential of energy impacting against its surface. Modern science presumes that heat travels in some mysterious manner across the vast 90 million miles of space between the Sun and the Earth, crossing that space in which a temperature of nearly absolute zero prevails, and then arriving here hot. Man feels warmth from the sun, and in some manner it must be accounted for. The theory arrived at is far from the truth. Somewhere in the intervening low potential between the Sun and the Earth is the inertial plane, where the pressures of the potentials of the Sun and Earth are equalized. Against this inertial plane, the Sun's cooling and expanding radiation impacts and reverse its expansion into contraction. The cooling, expanding, lowering potential reverses into heating, contracting, rising potential. By this impact, the expanding radioactive energy is reversed into contracting, genero-active energy. By the impact of the Sun's regenerated light emanations against this planet, all disintegrating matter is regenerated. Every living thing reverses its nightly intent to die and lives again. Flowers which have folded their petals reopen them and grow. Animal life which has closed its eyes in sleep becomes conscious once more and takes on new energy. The modern concept that solar energy is due to contraction is a misconcept. The energy given off from the sun is energy that is being generated within the sun. No energy can be radiated that has not been or is not being generated. All radiating mass is generating. All opposite effects of motion are simultaneous in their expression. The sun is preponderantly generative. It is heating. The sun is in a lesser degree radiative. It is cooling. As the sun heats, it radiates. Radiation disintegrates. As the sun cools, it generates. Generation integrates. Here follows the law of the cycle of appearance and disappearance of form. Cold generates. Generation contracts. Contraction integrates. Integration heats. Heat radiates. Radiation expands. Expansion disintegrates. Disintegration cools. Thus it may be seen that one opposite is always born of the other, which in its turn becomes the cause of the first. Thus it may be seen that the disintegration of the preponderantly generating sun becomes the regeneration of this planet. The coefficient of cold for an expanded volume of mass of low pressure and potential becomes the coefficient of heat for the same mass in a contracted volume of higher pressure and higher potential. The totals of heat and potential have not changed. They have merely changed their dimensions. Nor has heat travelled. It has been reproduced. Magnetic flow in its magnetic orbit has been interrupted, that is all. The voice impacting against the cliff is an exact analogy. The voice regenerates into sound, and the positive charge of the cliff increases because of the impact. The heat from the sun has been disintegrated by radiation into the opposite of heat, which is cold. In radiation, however, the heat energy is not lost. Nothing can be lost. The energy which generated that heat is registered together with the energy that radiated it in an expanded counterpart of them both. No idea of mind once begun ever ends. No idea of mind ever began or ever ended. The law. In any wave, the inductive current seeks the high pressures at the apex of its cone of energy, and the conductive current seeks the low pressures at its base. Released pressure of low potential at zero. Positive, negative induction attracts induction. Intense pressure of high potential. Induction in preponderance, conduction minus. Released pressure of low potential at zero. Negative positive, conduction repels both conduction and induction. Intense pressure of high potential. Conduction in preponderance, induction minus. If you are finding value in my channel, please consider supporting me to bring you more quality productions by liking, subscribing, hitting the notification bell, sharing with your network, and if you are in a position to do so, by leaving a donation, and there is a link to do this in the description section below. Thank you.